Welcome everyone to DBT Office Hours. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we'd love if you could turn your camera on if possible. It just helps speakers realize there's people on the other side of the call, and also just mute yourself for unless you intend to talk, of course. So today we're going to be talking. We've got a few different people from all around the world sharing some of their tips and tricks for making your DBT projects a little better, I guess, but using some automations to do that rather than doing that manually. The way we're going to run this is we have 3 speakers. I'm just going to see which one unmutes themselves first to speak first. And if you do have a question for them, so each presentation is going to be maybe 10 to 15 minutes. If you do have a question for them, you can just jot it down in the chat. And then when we get to sort of the end of the presentation, we'll throw to you so you can ask the question out loud. It just works a little more nicely for the recording at the end if you can ask your question out loud. And also take the time to introduce yourself. So I should do that now. My name's Claire. I'm the DBT Community Manager. I'm currently in a bedroom in Michigan. So I have moved spots from my normal spot, just up here for the next few weeks. Yeah, super excited to have everyone join us. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and see if any of our 3 speakers wants to go first.
Yeah, I would be happy to do that.
Perfect.
One sec. Can you see my screen now? Super. First of all, thanks for having me. I've been attending a couple of these office hours and I found the format really great and also the content quite valuable. So happy to be here and share 2 cents. So a lot of you might be wondering, like, what is this Ingatlan? What does it mean? What is this Ingatlan.com that Claire shared in the invite? And it means real estate in Hungarian, and we happen to be the market leader real estate listing site in Hungary. It consists of about 150 people, and we have a relatively small data team of 6 people, and I'm the sole data engineer so far. Last year, we had a big data warehouse migration project that helped us to go from PostgreSQL with Airflow and a lot of stored procedures into a neat and clean BigQuery DBT cloud setup. Along the way, we had a lot of positive outcomes, and one to mention is from 2.5 hours, we shrinked our daily runs to 7 minutes. And a lot of other things that DBT happens to bring out of the box has been quite helpful also. A little bit about our architecture. So we have a snowplow kind like tracker and collector system for event-based data from the client side and the server side that goes through a Kubernetes cluster and ends up in BigQuery. We have the production databases replicated with Stitch and Aluma also into BigQuery. We have Firebase exports and Google Analytics exports into BigQuery, and we have some homegrown solutions that siphon data from Salesforce and Google Sheets with via cloud storage also into BigQuery. And on top of that, we run all the DBT transforms, and the tables will be presented and the diagrams with either Data Studio or Tableau, depends on the teams and each individual. So as you can see, BigQuery is in the middle of the architecture, at least in the different infrastructure. And DBT hubs with all the transformations, you know, with the EIT or ETL, the T. But what I want to talk about today is documentation. And let's be honest, everybody knows that it can be a pain in the ass or a pain in the neck, creating and maintaining it and making sure that everything is properly documented. And we have about 8 source systems, 100+ source tables, 100+ models, and making sure that everything is neatly documented needs some extra supervision. Before that, we had some of our documentation in Excel sheets, Google Sheets, sometimes in Confluence. sometimes just nowhere or in some random developer's mind. And then we always had to ask on Slack, like, what does this column really mean? And it's not really maintainable. And in the last year or a couple of years, there's been a wave of systems that help to rein in metadata, such as Lyft's Amundsen, Weaver's Marquez, or Google Cloud's data catalog. But we went with DBT's documentation side that comes out of the box and integrates nicely with all the other things like tests and the YAML files for the sources and the models. So we didn't want to invest extra energy or operations into having another system. We've been quite happy what DBT comes with. So we just wanted to keep it simple, and it's been working great. And the question is, like, how do you measure documentation or the state of your documentation? You know, there's this saying that if you can measure it, you can't improve it. And I'm not sure that it's true for all parts of life, but at least in this small sphere, I think it has some truth in it. And the proper documentation is defined by us right now, that the table and all of its columns have a description. You can change it, you can play around with it, be a bit more forceful or less restrictive. This is what we started out with. And also, how do you measure for all your sources or all your models? Basically, it's just the ratio of the properly documented tables to all the tables. So basically, if for 6 tables out of 10, all the columns in the table has a description in the source files, then you get a score of 60. And as a neat motivator and also kind of an eye candy on your GitLab project, but also you could use it with GitHub, we made these badges, or sometimes they call it shields, that shows the current score for the model docs and source docs. If you had snapshots, then you would have another badge also with a number, and we colored it so that you see like what's the state or status. And how we do it, it's a small Python utility that works from the manifest.json that comes with dbt compile and everything else, and just go through it and checks if everything is well and properly documented. I will show you a little demo and show you how you change it. So basically, I guess you are familiar with how you can document your sources. I just used a BigQuery public data source for New York City bikes. You see it was well populated with the description. So I just had a little utility that just generates this YAML file if you already have a BigQuery table with all the descriptions. So it makes it easier, so you don't have to do it manually. And once you have it, you start writing different transformations. I just went with some really demo-ish kind of ones just to use some sources. And also I documented the models with some tests. I was focusing with this demo more on the description, so I could have used more tests, but the highlight today is more about on the description, at least for my side. So if you run this utility, with that debug option and the threshold of 50, then you will see with all the debug messages that the model trip to capacity ratio is missing its description. So the table is named trip to capacity ratio, and the column 2, and it's missing its description. So from the 3 models, only 2 are properly documented. And if you fix it, and on dbt compile, and one sec, run it again, you see that it was fixed. And now for the model, we have 100 score. And if you run just with another setup with this little tool, then it updates the badge on your GitLab page. And if I refresh it, you will see that now the model docs is at 100%, and the sources I didn't finish it. If I changed these two lines that were missing, then I would get to 100. So what is it good for? You can measure the progress, like what and the status of your documentation. It can motivate your team members to, properly document it. You can put it in your CI pipeline. So if it's below a certain threshold, or if it's not 100%, then you don't let in your pull or merge request. And also at the end, just to make it a bit more fun, you can just update from the CI the GitLab badges, and then you will see it just with a glimpse, like where you are. And so this is what I've been up to. I want to add some model selection so that it would be easier to select just a few models to run the documentation check, so that it can be run in different scenarios. And if that happens and it works so well, then we'll be happy to open source it and let others use it. So this is it. I hope you like it.
It's really cool. We've got a question already.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ron, did you have a question there?
Yeah, okay, so two questions. First of all, I see that you ran the compile and it immediately kind of told you the percentage, so you tooled it into the compile somehow? You didn't need to run another thing? Or was
no, I had to run compile so that, the manifest.json is updated. And then the tool just parses the manifest.json and go through all the models and sources.
So how did the tool know that it's time to reread the manifest and refresh?
I just clicked on the run in PyCharm.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just missed that. And the second question, I'm kind of what I do is I actually come from the software development world into the data world, and to try and kind of give all the good or to help analysts use all the good things that software developers had for a long time, which to some degree is what DBT is all about. And one of the things on the software development side is there's an attempt to actually minimize documentation and try to make the code as self-documenting as possible. So as a software developer, my first instinct when you said, oh, I'm trying to encourage everybody to document every field, is that you definitely want to document fields that are, where there's something about them that is not clear. But normally you would want the name of the field to kind of self-document. I'm just kind of wondering if you are kind of thinking in that direction, or what were your considerations in deciding that you actually do want to incentivize and measure quality by actually having every field having a description?
Yeah, actually, you're right. In the sense that once the column name itself is self-descriptive, then it's okay. But then you just copy in the the description if you wanna make it a bit looking so that it looks a bit better on your documentation side. Of course, it's going to tell probably, like 80% of the information, but maybe you can add like what, different values it can take or where it comes from and things like that. So if you use the model selection later, then, you can just decide that there are some crucial tables, or just use this check on tables that has a different, like a specific tag, so that only the important tables are well documented. And you have some other tables that just one-offs, so you don't really need it, and then you are a bit more carefree with the documentation and on these. But it's better to have it rather than not have it, so we try to incentivize that.
Yeah, I think that's I totally agree with that. Like, model selection could be a really powerful feature here. I know when I'm documenting things, I'm pretty strong on like document the sources, because it's always really useful to just have a few sentences to say, you know, where does this data come from? How does it get here? Who to ask if it's broken, things like that. So documenting like that edge of the DAG and documenting those final models. But yeah, so I think like that model selection would be a really cool next step in this.
Thanks.
Cool. Dennis, do you want to introduce yourself and ask your question?
Hi, I'm Dennis. I'm on the analytics team at Drizzly. I was just kind of curious since you put so much work in making sure everything's properly documented in DBT, are there any, I don't know, problems with most people interacting through Tableau and then having your data dictionary and Tableau kind of exist separately?
Yeah, we did not use, I think, this Tableau dictionary that much yet. And we saw like when a new analyst came on the team and then she was asking about, you know, what this column means, what this table means. And we thought that it's really neat if you have it in the documentation side. And also now it's in 0.17.0. You have the parasites docs in BigQuery, so that if you you know, add all these documentation with the YAML files, then automatically you can put it on to BigQuery tables. So if someone just goes there and wants to try it from the console, then everything will come from these files straight to BigQuery. And from BigQuery also you can just put it into data catalog on Google Cloud. So it goes all the way up. But with Tableau, we didn't really put any effort, I think, there yet. But it's a good suggestion, so I can't answer it like correctly yet.
Josh Andrews' question here. So I noticed you're using both Tableau and Google Data Studio. It's a long story, we've been using Google Data Studio a bit too, and I think we've definitely encountered some challenges. It definitely has a lot of limitations compared to a tool like Tableau. Why are you using both? Are you moving towards one or the other? And if you're going to be using Google Data Studio significantly or more still, like how are you getting around like some of the challenges or limitations that it has compared to some other tools?
It's a good question. The ratio, I think it's like 90 to 10 for Tableau. So Data Studio is more like for one-off reports that you just want to, you know, play around with and just to get a glimpse, or for someone who's not that familiar with Tableau. But like the official reports that, you know, management uses and things like that, usually made in Tableau. And it's really easy to start with it with Data Studio, but after, you know, going a bit deeper, then you are missing the features that are so, you know, normal in Tableau. So I see that they are making a lot of new features and advancements, but I think, you know, it's still far away.
Got it. Thank you.
And then we've got Dale. We'll get last question from Dale, and then we'll pass on to Theo.
Oh, thanks. Hi, Dale, London, also in the bedroom. Just wondering if you managed to do that for understanding sort of testing coverage as well, or if that's just for documentation coverage.
Not yet, but it's a bit like it's like, you know, code coverage for documentation.
And I think potentially some of our other speakers might be talking about test coverage. Fingers crossed. Okay, awesome. Theo, over to you.
Cool. Let me just share my screen and get set up.
While you're doing that, I should also say thank you so much, Balazs, for that. That was fantastic. I'd love to see that open sourced as well.
Thank you.
Great. Can everyone see that? Okay.
Yes.
I assume that's a yes. Great. So I'm Theo. I work at Monzo, which is a bank in the UK. We've been around for 5 years. I've been around there for a year, and I'm a data engineer there. We have our data team is about, I think, 30 people. Our data engineering team at the moment is effectively 3. It's varied between more and less, but it's like quite small for the size of the company. Yeah, and I'm just going to talk about some like handy automations that we've built in to DBT. I'm going to super quickly go over our setup at Monzo. So the bank runs in AWS. We've got, this diagram is a bit out of date. We've got, I think, 1,600, 1,700 plus microservices. All of these microservices fire off events. Each microservice will fire off most likely multiple events. An event will be sent out when something small happens. I'm sending a transaction that might to someone that might send out a handful of events. Events are all the same structure. There's like event metadata and then a big JSON blob containing the details of what particularly happened in that event. And they all get shoved onto this thing we call the fire hose, which is a massive, massive message queue. This is kind of where the boundary of Bankland, as we call it, ends. We shift over from AWS to Google Cloud Platform. Our events go into two tables. Per event, there will be, per event it goes into two tables, a sanitized version and a raw version. The sanitized version will be have sensitive fields omitted. The raw version will have basically the entirety of the event. Then we have DBT acting on those raw events, and we have Looker as our dashboarding platform to get insight into those entity tables that we build up. There's another diagram. I'm just going to skip over that in the interest of time. So we've got 2,700 data models at Monzo. It's a lot. It's really it's been problematic in many ways, but we've built stuff around it to help with that. Of those models, 1,200 are base models. A base model is directly linked to an event, and base models we say should be incredibly simple. They should only extract the fields from the JSON blob and present that as columns in a table in BigQuery. Staging tables will perform aggregations over base tables and maybe other staging tables and joins and stuff. And then entity models will maybe join multiple staging models or even bring in some base models. And these are the models which feed into our dashboarding platform. So you imagine the entity is the neat kind of consumable version. All of our data team plus extended people outside the data team contribute to all types of models. We don't define roles which restrict you to different parts of this data transform process. So it's quite a big undertaking, and we decided to move to DBT a year ago, just when I joined. We needed to do migration really fast with a lot of people and with a lot of data models. So we figured there were some things slowing us down and some things completely blocking us with DBT. So we forked it. So I'll be speaking from the perspective of us making direct changes to the DBT codebase to allow some us to do some fun stuff. So it's 4 areas which I'm just going to cherry pick some automations that we've added. Setting up a model, making safe changes to those models once they're set up. How do we run these in production, and what do we do when they go wrong? So let's go into a demo. Let's say I am a data scientist or back-end engineer, and I've just written a service that fires out an event. I want to bring in that event to a analytics table and potentially make a dashboard out of it. How do I do that? So the first thing I do is I fire up the DBT Monzo shell. This is like a development environment for data. You've got contextual information here, which DBT version we're on 0.15, we're a bit behind. Oops. The Git branch and your development data set. This is set up as soon as you enter the Monzo shell and is based on your computer host name. So it'll automatically set up a development data set for you minus DBT here when you bank dev. So straight away I can start running things. But what I'm going to do first is I know the name of my raw event. I've the fully qualified name. I've picked it out at random, and I'll do one of the kind of first automations that I'll show you is new base event. So I just autofilled that, but this is the command dbt monzo new base event, and this is the name of the event. I've put in a false here because it already exists. I can run that. That will find the raw event in the table, in the raw events table. Unpack the JSON blob, go through each field, nested fields included, and build a SQL file for me, which is automatically extracting those fields from that raw blob.
So
hopefully
I'm going to confirm my own understanding. So you have like just one huge table that all events are in, no relational, like no customers table. It's just all events.
Yeah, at the raw event level, there's a table per raw event.
Okay.
So yeah, there's like tens of thousands of tables with all containing different types of raw events.
Cool, thank you.
No worries.
Do you retain the structure, or do you flatten like the nested structure, or do you flatten everything?
So I'll show you. Let's see what we've created here in the SQL file. This has just been generated now. Basically do a JSON extract. See, this is like quite a deeply nested thing. We just unnest it and join the name with underscores as a basic first step. Sometimes this works and you don't need to make any changes. Other times I'll need to go through and rename these fields and make it like a bit more sensible. There have been cases where dotted names clash with other like underscore names that already exist. But yeah, this is like a way to automatically then convert this JSON blob into a table that we can start doing some more sophisticated stuff over. It also generates a schema file. I can quickly show you that, maybe. Yeah, that might be it. Yeah, and adds a test for us to say if this event isn't fired within 3 days, then just like fail with a 1 severity. We can change that, delete that, whatever. Is not always relevant. So that's when we've got a base event from scratch. I'm just looking at the time. Yeah, okay, I'll keep it quick. What happens when we've got an existing table? We can generate a schema from that if the table already exists. So let's say, again, what is it, schema gen. I'm just choosing a table here that I've already got. And I can generate the schema for that. Oh, actually, I'm going to remove the existing one already, actually, because it pops up something fun. So I'm generating that schema now. It's looking at BigQuery, taking the like information schema, whatever, and saying, okay, I know this exists. I'm going to create a schema file from it. What it's done now is it's found 2 columns that exist already in our documentation folder, and it's saying, are these columns the same as the ones already documented? If so, we can automatically add that in, references to those docs in. So we say, yes, great, let's do that. And we can have a look at what that's produced. Here, so these 2 fields, it's now automatically referenced the documentation that exists already. Some cases, the fields will match, but the documentation won't be the same. There's like manual controls you can do to override that. So next, that was setting up with new models and stuff. How do we make safe changes to models? There's 2 things we do here. I've lost my notes. The 2 things that we do are CI checks and a upstream prod command. I'll just quickly brush over the CI checks. We run this in Google Cloud Build in our like analytics repo where all of our SQL models are. Yep. Okay. And we've got this. Sorry. So, okay, this is one of our CI checks that we do, and this is built into dbt. So we run dbt Monzo CI. We can give it a model selector if we want, and we've got like commands that we can run here. So check the models are tagged. We say, take a look at all the models which are type entity and make sure they have a run tag. A run tag guarantees that they can run, that they do run in production when you commit the model. We can check that all models have schemas. We can check that they have top-level descriptions. So we haven't enabled this, but it's currently 0 out of 10. We can say, okay, if the model's critical and it's an entity, then require a certain level of documentation coverage. So I could say 60% of fields, columns, whatever needs to be documented. We don't have that enabled for the moment. And some other stuff we can say only contain hard, like non-ref macros in base models. So we avoid like random third-party data sources coming in midway through the DAG, and some other stuff here. That runs every time someone commits to our like analytics repo. And then the other thing, which is quite cool, is if you're making changes to a model, you want to be able to run that model in full, ideally, to make sure that the changes you've made haven't broken anything and the results are as you expect. So say I've made changes to this model right at the end of a DAG, and I want to run those changes. On its own, like regularly, I'd run all the upstream models using the plus operator and then run this model. Instead, what I can do is with the dbt Monzo upstream command, I can say, okay, run this in my development data set, but take these two models, which are upstream, from production. So let's see what that looks like. This is the model I just showed you. First, it'll tell you what it's doing, and then it'll do it. So, ignore this thing. I've created like a separate environment where I'm running over a much smaller number of models. But yeah, here it's basically said, okay, I'm going to run this in your development data set, and I'm going to take this data from upstream. Great. What happens if we've got a more complex case, and say I'm making changes to this model and this model, and I want to do the same thing. I don't want to run like everything upstream from it as well. I give it both models, and it will I give it both models, and it'll automatically work out in between which models should run in my development data set and which models it should take from production. So you'll see, if I just draw this on the diagram, like this model will run in my development data set. These two models will run in my development data set to propagate the changes from this model, and this model will also run in my development data set. So, God, my computer's really struggling. Yeah, you can see here now it's told us what it's going to do. As I said, these four models will run in our development environment, and these will take data from production. Wonderful. Moving on from this, next is running models in production. I'm going to skip over that. It's not that interesting. Basically, if you tag a model as run equals nightly, then commit it, it'll automatically be picked up in our like nightly DAG definition, and models will run overnight. There's a ton of complexity where we have set up Airflow to integrate with Monzo. We've ripped out different parts of DBT and put it in different places. It works, but it's quite complex. Could do with some simplification. I'm like happy to talk about that another time. And the last is what happens when it goes wrong. I'll just show you what a failed CI check looks like. So of the number of steps that we do, it will run, so I didn't speak about this actually, it will run all the models that you've changed just using a git diff command. It'll run tests, so it'll run those models with a 0 row limit, which is effectively free in BigQuery and fast, and it creates empty tables, but does schema validation and checks and makes sure that everything's okay. And then we run tests over those empty models, which don't fail. There's no test change here, so that's okay. This is just a syntactic check over the tests that you've written. It won't actually run the tests over your data. We only run them in production. Yeah, so a static CI failure looks like this. Failures are highlighted. Okay, 2 models are missing schema files. Great, go fix that, or it even gives you the command to run. We could improve that. That's what it's at the moment. And then debugging failures, I'll just show you this nifty thing. I'm aware of, I want to be able to answer some questions, so I'm going to skip over to this channel here. This is what our failure notifications look like. I'm going to jump into this one here, which is a model has failed, and here we can see we get some buttons to help us go to places which might help us work out why it's failed. So we can see the log in Airflow, a direct link to the table in BigQuery, blah, blah, blah. A nifty thing here is we can click the compiled SQL. That'll take us to a page with the compiled SQL, and I can hit copy that. That'll take me over to BigQuery, where I can paste the query in and just start debugging it on the fly. And that's it. Where am I? I'm here. Okay, and I just listed out all the changes that we've made just for fun, because it was quite fun to see. And if anyone's got questions about any of that, happy to talk about that. But yeah, that's my presentation demo. Sorry, I didn't leave that long for questions. But yeah, okay.
That's incredible. Thanks so much, Theo.
Always.
Does anyone very quickly have a question? Rand from Honey, do you want to go for it?
Yeah, you really got my interest with this thing where you get the data for where you reference for things that have not changed production, and only and this is something that I'm kind of looking into and really interested in doing. I would love to know how you did this. I mean, I was thinking of maybe playing with the definition of the ref macro, or do you because you have this pre-process, do you pre-process and create the DBT files, DBT models that just take it from a different place, or and also this is also a question for Claire, whether you know of any other efforts around this, or places that I can look at existing code.
You want me to go first on this one, because it might influence Theo's answer.
Go for it.
Date tracking is a thing that we're going to build, I think, in 2018 or 2019. So for reference, we released 2017 today. So things like commands, so better model selection, where you can do things like DBT run changed. So that will be a native feature in the next few months.
That's for only runnings, the ones that changed.
Or you can do things upstream of run changed. In terms of selecting from production models and switching out those refs, I think you can use the ref override. I'm not sure if that's how Monzo have done it, but there is a way to override the ref function to have different behaviors. It's not a thing that I've played around with, so yeah, I'll throw to.
Oh, so there is a ref override. That's something that exists. Okay, so I can just look into that, and that's top level DBT.
I just missed that. Whether it's going to know whether it changed though. We have a way to override ref, but I'm not confident that it will know. There's an interface for whether this model has changed or not. So.
Right, no, that's a different thing. I mean, the question of kind of identifying, we can do something good enough for now, and until you have that for us.
Yeah.
But the override is what I'm kind of looking to. Thank you.
Cool. Sorry, I kind of stole that question there.
That's okay. We did it by just creating our own task instance and patching the manifest, given what we know. Give it one model, find all upstream dependencies, and replace the data set with the production data set. If you give multiple ones, do some graph maths and work out basically all the nodes in between the models that you give.
One thing that's worth saying here is if you're using Snowflake, there are actually easier ways to do this, where you can just clone a whole database, and then you don't have to worry about selecting from a different thing, because you have a zero copy clone. So very relatively fast and doesn't cost anything to get it, copy that data set. So that's another option depending on the warehouse tech you're using.
Yeah, cool. I think that's probably there's time for work.
Yeah, spot on.
Thank you. I should just say, I really want to contribute this stuff back to DBT, but we haven't had time yet. It's planned in Q3, so I'm really looking forward to.
Excellent. I'll get you in touch with Jeremy, who's thinking hard about how to make contributions easier. So amazing.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, Jeremy's on the chat. Hi, Jeremy. Okay, Jonathan, you're up.
Hey, everyone. My name is Jonathan. I'm in Toronto. I work for Snaptravel. We're a travel company. And actually, that previous discussion leads in really well to what I'm about to present, which is all about how we do CI efficiently, which hinges on our ability to replicate production as well as only look at changes. So I'm going to present here and go through this. Okay. Can you see my screen? It's good?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so my presentation is going to be all about how the custom scripts that we've built to do CI very efficiently. So first of all, our motivation for CI is to make it fast so that we can quickly iterate and analysts can see a pipeline passing within minutes rather than hours. We also want to match production as much as possible. And we want to test all the changes. So anything that you've made on the model level, macro level, we want to make sure that you can see that and run all the tests on that in your pipeline so there's no surprises in production. So our basic workflow, and this is something that comes up a lot in the Slack, and I've posted this before, but I found this workflow to be very powerful, and it's pretty much gotten us this far. And now we have 5 to 10 people working on DBT, business users, analysts, engineers, and so far this has held up. So the first thing we do is we clone production. So just what Claire was talking about, we put everything into a single production schema, but you can also, if you have different schemas, you can also just clone your entire database. It takes a few minutes, and then you get a perfect copy of your production environment. You can also replicate this using some clever dbt run commands and other custom stuff that you just saw. But in the Snowflake context, this is really easy. The second thing we do is we find all of the changed models as well as changed objects, and we build and test them and their children. This is done by comparing your branch to the master branch, the latest master, and doing some fun stuff when it comes to parsing the manifest to look at relationships. And then the final thing is where we lint all of these changed models. And it's pretty much similar to the first presentation you saw. We look at schema tests, we look at documentation, we fail or pass the pipeline based on if you match a certain set of criteria. So the first thing we do is clone production. This is done now using a run operation that's part of the Snowflake utils DBT package. It's really good, you should check it out. And this step usually takes about 3 to 4 minutes, depending on how much stuff you have in your production environment. The second thing we do is build and test change models. And by the way, I'll go through a demo of this after I present this. But what it looks like in our, we use GitLab. So in our GitLab YAML is running this script against your target branch in a development environment and choosing the commands that you want to run. So in CI, we want to run all of our change models and we want to test them. We also want to do that for all of their children. And we also want to do a full refresh, which is kind of paired with this target, this dev target, because when you choose a target that is development, a lot of our big models we build using a small sample window. So that's how we can do a full refresh without the pipeline taking forever. Finally, we make sure that every change in model has 4 things: a unique test, a not null test, a description, and columns. But of course, you got to help people out when one of these things can't be matched. So right now, we just set up a tag called skip lint, which means that you can ignore some of these. And it could be a little bit more specific, but some tables have dupes by nature. So this is something that we had to add as part of V0. And when it comes to linting, it's pretty much just parsing the manifest. as people have talked about before. So you can see that with some fancy parsing of the manifest, you can get the list of tests, descriptions, columns for every model. And then you can, apply whatever criteria you want to that result. And so two main data sources are the output of git diff and a manifest JSON. Or you can also use dbt-ls using a JSON output or whatever output you want. That'll give you something that's similar to the manifest. The quickest way, just for everyone to know, to generate a manifest.json, this is according to Drew himself, is dbt-ls and then putting it into dev null. And all the code I'm showing here, I have on my GitHub page. So just like ping me if you want to get a link to this, like an actual link to this after. Okay, let's go to the demo. So I started building this little model here. For some reason, I'm really interested in users who have an odd user ID. I'm really into that right now. So I built this little model. It's materialized as a view. It's pulling from our users model and applying this function to only, or this filter to only take in IDs that are odd. So if I run a git diff, and I also have like a little parallel universe of our master branch here called office hours master, which has some fun stuff. So if I do a git diff, then you'll see that the only changes are this model here, odd users, and the little boilerplate schema YAML entry that I created on the side here. So when we run this script, you're going to see that it's going to first generate a manifest JSON. Shout out to the DBT Fishtown team for .17. It's a great release. So you'll see that the run that gets executed here is dbt run, target dev, and this changed model. So it parses the git diff and it returns this dbt run command. And then it'll also go into run to do the test one right after. Yeah, we probably don't have to wait for this to compile. Yeah, you can see it just goes through and runs this. You can also add children here. You can add full refresh, and it'll just run the dbt commands as you see them. Okay, so one of the cool things that that we do look at as well is what happens when you make a change to a macro that feeds into a model, but you don't actually touch the model itself. So we have support for that here, where if you make a change to the macro, it'll parse the manifest, find the nodes or the models that depend on that macro and run those as well, even if you didn't touch it. So I'll show you here. In this office hours master parallel universe, they were actually really interested in filtering users by some sort of ID. So I have this macro here, filter users, and this is in our core users model. And this macro basically just applies this mod function here, returns true. If it's odd, returns false. If it's even. And what I'm going to do is I want to be even more, well, actually, let me just remind you that the only difference right now between the office hours master branch and my branch here is these two files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be even more restrictive here. I'm going to say, I want you to return false when it's divisible by 3 as well. I'm not sure why, but there must be some sort of logic to the madness. So I can do this. Okay, if I save this here, you'll see that I changed this macro but I didn't change the user's file here at all. So I'll run my script again, and it should pick up the this user's model as changed, which is really useful for when you're changing something that might be a list that you store in a macro, might be some business logic, but you don't actually have to change the model itself. And so when we run this script, it runs the dbtls. So depending on the size of your project, it will actually take a little bit of time, but it's usually not that bad. We don't have the insane number of models that Monzo has, where we're much smaller than that, but we do have a significant number. So you can see here that it picks up that change, and now you run both the odd users model that we created as well as this users model here. Okay, so that's an example, and this is something that really helps us in our CI, because you can, with the combination of cloning and only running changed models in children, CI is blazing fast. And it also saves a lot of cost because you don't have to build, you have to build a lot less. Cloning is very cheap, so you can pretty much get away with really fast, really cheap CI without sacrificing anything when it comes to data integrity. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the schema YAML here, and I'm gonna demo our linter. So we have this boilerplate schema YAML here, and I'm gonna try running the linter here. So here, I just set my compare branch to office hours master, and it basically parses the manifest.json, and it finds that this model, odd users, does not have unique or not null tests, or it's just one of those, cause it to flag here. And it also doesn't have a valid schema YAML entry. So I'm gonna add descriptions here. Let's see what happens. And in this case, I have to actually rerun the manifest. In CI, the manifest is already generated from from other commands like compile. So I'm just doing this for the demo, but yeah, usually after you've done your run and your test, you can run the linter locally, and it just parses your manifest and tells you if if you're missing certain things that we deem as important. Okay. Yeah, and so then you can see that the documentation got resolved, but it's still flagging because of these missing tests. So we're going to set these tests here, and we're going to run this here. So that's basically what we use in CI. It's a collection of scripts. It's really simple, but very powerful. And this has come up a lot in the Slack. So anybody has any questions or wants to see the code, let me know. Happy to answer.
What's your GitHub user? How do we find your information?
Yeah, so I will. I can post that. I'll post that in the thread on the office hours. Yeah, I'll post the links to these scripts.
Josh Andrews, on-prem here. Have you looked at all at SQL Fluff for linting of your models? Or do you know what SQL Fluff is?
Yeah. I did play around with it for a second, and I mean, it seems great. That I didn't get past the setup stage, but from what I understand, that's more of a linting, as in formatting tool, rather than a checking to see if this relation has the requisite tests and descriptions in a DBT context.
Agreed. It wouldn't do test or documentation coverage. It wouldn't have anything to do with your YAML stuff. It would be purely for SQL linting.
Yeah. I mean, I probably should take a closer look at it, but whoever comes up with the first widely distributed SQL linter they get an award of some sort.
Just to round that out, we're actually going to we're chatting with the Tails team at the moment to find someone to speak from their team. They have so many good things to say. So we've had Alan chat a couple of times, so we're just chatting with some other people on the team. And hopefully in a few weeks we'll have someone from their team join and might get touched on then.
I'm sorry, you're talking, say again, this is about chatting to whom?
A member of the community, Alan Cruikshank from Tails.com, has written a SQL linter called SQL Fluff. And we're hoping to have someone else from their team present soon on office hours. So keep an eye out, because we might also cover that topic.
Does it also like tell you things like if you want to run, like show me all uses of table X, does it do that too?
It's just you have not just a, because it's very powerful. You have a SQL select statement. Does it match our SQL style conventions?
Yeah.
Cool. I have a general question, maybe for all of our speakers. You've all done some very cool things. What were some of the, I don't know, pitfalls or like words of advice in terms of maybe companies that shouldn't take these kinds of projects on? Like I know, for example, Monzo has data engineering resources and has huge data sets that'd be super expensive. So like to reprocess, so the trade-offs kind of worth it there. So yeah, engineering's all trade-offs. What are some of the trade-offs that you made when building these things?
I think if I can just talk about our experience. So we started out using that bash function dbt run change that has floated around for a long time, and then we wanted it to be a little bit more performant. So that's why we invested time into building out some Python scripts. And I think parsing the manifest and doing this kind of stuff as a way to sort of stay ahead of the dbt development curve, I think it's pretty feasible for a lot of companies. It might help from a documentation perspective. Maybe this should be a blog post, or maybe someone should talk about, if you were to take on these kind of tasks, here's how you would, here's what the manifest does, here's how you can look at run results, what's a good way to parse them? Because it seems like a lot of people, potentially all three of us presenters, have parsed the manifest here in some way, duplicating a lot of code. I'm almost wondering if maybe that should be something that's just publicly available.
It's pretty valid. I think part of the reason it's not documented is because it's liable to change.
Yeah.
But we're hoping to 1.0 soon. And that will be something that once it's stable, we can definitely document in a much better way than, I mean, I've done it too, import manifest.json and then list the keys to figure out what's actually in there.
Yeah. Actually, that did, when in .17, they added sources to the top level of the manifest, which did break my script for like a second. So, but that was a really easy fix.
For us, the trade-off, I think one of the big ones was the overhead of onboarding new people. If they haven't used dbt or something similar before, it's quite a shock to the system, I think. So it takes like a long time to get your mindset into a way of thinking, like in a way compatible with dbt, especially given that we've like added so many weird things to it. There's a lot to take on. So investing in the onboarding process as you develop like your additions to dbt, I think is super important, and something that maybe we could have done better.
Basically, for us, it's a different scale than Monzo or even Snaptravel, but the others were right that manifest.json just comes in when you want to, start playing around and then get some information. So it's like an API or like a comment for it, and maybe it would have other developers later. But so far, we are happy with this one too. So no worries.
That's all really valuable. Okay, we are right on time. So thank you so much to our three speakers today. Really interesting to see a few different approaches to different parts of automating and improving dbt projects. Just as a very quick reminder to people that are still on the call, we have our New York meetup happening on Friday. You can join the Events NYC channel to see a post for that, and I'll be posting about it in announcements shortly. And we've just announced another DBT office hours, which we'll add some more details on. My coworker Jeremy, who's on the call, is going to be talking about materialized views and whether they are as magical as the different data warehouse techs make them out to be, what they actually mean on each warehouse and how you can use them with DBT. So that's going to happen next week. There'll be some more details on that. And we'll post this video in the next couple of days. So yeah, thank you again to everyone for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, everyone.